There you go. Our mics are on. Director Bess O'Brien and the tour manager, Heidi Clower. Thanks for sticking around for this Q&A. We really appreciate it. I know I was in that audience when Bess shot this film. It was at the Shelburne Museum in June? August of last year. And the film gets you, as you said to me just moments ago, the film gets you close. Where we were parked, because it was still a time of, I don't know, great tentativeness, we were further away. And people were spread out, actually, so that no one encroached that much. Remember what last August looked like. Anyway, I loved it when I saw it. It wasn't shocking, but it was just so sophisticated, honestly, and so truthful. And so I am reminded of all of that, and the film, because of the peculiar, I don't know, impact of this medium, just brings it back. Can you share with folks, both of you, going back and forth, the origin story of this, and then what you plan to do to take this film, because you all were here for the very first screening in any theater in Vermont to see Listen Up. But let's go back to last year and the years before that as it came together.
Yeah, so I'm a documentary filmmaker primarily, and I tricked everybody a little bit because this is actually not a documentary film. It's a filmed version of a live performance. But occasionally I like to do live theater, and so I go back and do that. And so it was in 2019 that we launched this project. I wanted to look at the lives of Vermont teens in Vermont, and I had done a project actually 15 years prior to this, which was the same thing, creating an original musical based on the lives of Vermont teens. And so I wanted to do it again to see what kids were thinking, feeling, wanting, needing. And so we launched the project. The first thing we did is we spent 8 months talking to over 800 kids across the state through individual interviews, conversations with kids, listening sessions. We took all of that material, created a script based on that material with teens, and then we wrote all the music. Teens wrote all the songs in collaboration with songwriter mentors. This was at the point where we were just about to start doing the auditions because we had slated to tour the show indoors in the fall of 2020. And we had booked the entire tour in 14 towns. And we were about to go into auditions in March of 2020, and we were about to write the final music, and everything fell apart. And so all the music writing had to move to Zoom. All these songs were written on Zoom. And we had to do then we had to push the entire project a year later. And in doing so, because we needed to rehearse the kids, and the only time to rehearse kids was in the summer. And so we had to push it till the summer of 2021. We did all the music writing in advance of that. We did all the casting online. Then we made the decision to start to move it outdoors because we were so nervous about COVID. So my design staff had to redesign the whole concept, get an outdoor stage, and we did 9 shows across Vermont last August. Do you want to talk just anything about the details of the summer and the rehearsals and a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the teen cast, we had about 25 students involved in the show, from our crew to our cast to our musicians. We had 15 cast members, we had about 7 or so crew members, and then we had 3 or 4 band members. And they started at Linden Institute on July 5th or 6th, and we were there rehearsing for 4 weeks. And they were all actually just getting to know each other. Some of them knew each other, but for the most part, they were all strangers at the beginning of the summer. And we had 4 weeks of intense rehearsals with 2 wonderful directors, Sarah Lowry and Isaac Eddy. And they did what was called Devised Theater. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term, but essentially it's really working with your actors to incorporate their feelings and emotions and having a lot of their input, as opposed to just saying, you're playing a character, here are your lines, this is how I want you to do it. They have a lot of dialogue throughout the summer with these students about getting their voices included, and also honoring all these 800 or so plus interviews that were done, and really knowing the responsibility that they had of sharing stories of their peers. And then we took the show on the road, like Beth said, we were outdoors. As you can imagine, that has its own challenges. They did a lot of their rehearsals outdoors, and it was heat, it was bugs, it was bee stings, it was smoke from the wildfires in out west that you heard in the story. So there were those challenges, and then of course just watching the weather very closely and being able to make that call of whether or not we were going to drive all the way to Norwich and set up a stage and find out it was going to get rained out. We had nine shows scheduled. We only had to cancel one for weather. And my favorite story is that when we did do our show in Norwich, we actually had a hot air balloon land right next to our stage. And it was just incredible to watch these teenagers on stage performing and not miss a beat. And just this huge hot air balloon just landed, and they didn't pay for tickets. So someone should have gone over and checked in. But no, it was just wonderful. And then to culminate at Shelburne Farms for 2 nights where we got to film it, and then on the State House lawn was our final show. And it was just phenomenal to have some of these themes presented right under our state capitol, and a lot of distinguished leaders in our state coming to see the show and really moving things forward and hearing what the teens were saying. We had some real good champions in our legislature. Becca Ballant was one that wrote a letter to every single student in the cast, a handwritten letter, which was really wonderful, and she's been a big champion of ours. So.
And we also showed the film to the legislature this spring. Becca Ballant brought it to the legislature. So guess who I'm voting for? Anyway.
Mark Levine was pretty impactful too.
Yeah.
He was a big supporter.
He was
of
the
ours.
health commissioner, is
Yeah.
that right?
Mhm.
Correct.
Do you know of any other state where this has taken place, where there's something comparable that, you know, there was notice out there that, hey, and there was a teen show, a musical that toured somewhere else, or do you think that this is really truly unique to Vermont at this point? You know, anything else?
Well, I mean, as I said, I had done this in 2005, 6, 7, something like that. It was called the Voices Project.
Yeah.
And I actually got the idea from a show that was done in New York City, probably in the 70s, called Runaways. It was directed by Elizabeth Swados. It was done at the Public Theater, and the idea was to go onto the street, interview kids who were runaway homeless kids, and then make a musical based on their lives. And I always thought that was the coolest thing ever. I'm really interested in documentary theater, and obviously I'm a documentary filmmaker too. So when I was thinking of doing a theater project, whatever now, 25 years ago, that's what came into mind, and I thought that would be really cool to base it on youth stories. So I don't know, I mean, of course, somewhere somebody's done something, but I think, yeah, it's pretty unique, and it's very powerful for the kids involved. It really gives them agency and a sense of voice. And the kids, I mean, it was a huge thing for these kids. We had 6 weeks, we only had 3.5 weeks to rehearse the entire thing, and then we took it on the road. And, you know, it was very powerful for them.
Yeah, a lot of the songs are, the lyrics are quite extensive, and yet they all mastered them.
Yeah.
The band is superb, and all high schoolers, I'm thinking, right? Yes? Really, it came together beautifully, and I want to ask about, since we're the first screening, and thank you, what else now? What's next? Because the film should be shown as widely as possible. What do you think will happen?
Well, we can both talk a little bit about that. I mean, the film is being screened in schools, so if anybody is from a school or has somebody in a school, we're encouraging schools to show this in schools, but also to parents. A lot of the kids were like, parents need to see this, adults need to see this. So parents, teachers, in-service days for schools. So a lot of schools are starting to use it in their curriculum and for you know, raising consciousness about what's going on with kids. We have a deck of cards, study guide cards, that can be used in classrooms, so you can watch the film and talk about it. It's being screened on PBS, Vermont PBS, in about a week. And we have some upcoming screenings in Burlington and CCV and other places around the state. And it's being shown at the Superintendent's Association Conference. Anything else about just, you know, getting it out there?
Yeah, no, I mean, we've screened it in a couple of communities. We've had libraries reach out and say they wanted to show it. So we've definitely done some screenings in the spring, and we're hoping to do more this fall, as Beth said. And it's just unfortunate, the timing of it all, because when we were gonna do it indoors, we were gonna start at the Barry Opera House, we were gonna end at the Flynn, it was gonna be packed houses, and it just ended up being less because of COVID and being outdoors. And we talked about this, we felt like it was just getting momentum when our tour was over. Like by the time it was at the State House lawn, we had huge crowds, and we were done. And at this point, you're seeing Bess and I on stage, normally we would have students from the show, but a lot of them have gone off to college. A lot of them are, you know, just getting started with school, and they're all over the state. So we try really hard for these Q&As to usually try and get 1 or 2 students that can give their voice to these Q&As. But unfortunately, that couldn't happen here. But we are trying to do that, especially for the upcoming screenings with like the superintendent's conference and
That's
the
good.
CCV.
Let's have Will Hoppin come up, because you saw the first film we showed tonight was Her Majesty's Lice. And I kind of felt that that film is extraordinarily creative, man. I'd like to get some insight on what was in your brain to make that. And because you use generations, after generations, kids, college students, right? We have that right?
Yeah.
Let's give Will Hoppin a round of applause. Are you now a Middlebury grad, or you got more time?
So I'm in a transfer program, so I did 3 years at Middlebury, and I haven't technically graduated, but I'm completing my credits at Columbia right now to finish up the next 2 years.
Okay.
But first of all, it's just such an honor to share the stage with you guys, so thanks for having me up here.
Sure.
But yeah, in terms
Nice hat, by the way.
Thank you, yeah, I just got it in my
Modeling
gift
that
bag.
white hat, doing well with it.
Yeah. I think the film started out with me listening to a bunch of Finnish folk music, and I was like, and I just come off this really intense project over J-Term, which is this month, like to do whatever at Middlebury that we have, where I made this television pilot with like a couple of my friends, and it was just this disaster. Like the whole production was chaotic. We were shooting in -9, long nights, and just the whole thing just didn't pan out. And so I was like, okay, how do we make something as like with as little melodrama as possible that just packs like just funny and weirdness in? Because I think student films will often like, try to just like be something like where you're just trying to say something so profound, and then it just, or at least in my experience, I've like tried to like say, here's a really important story, and it just like won't come through. And so I was just done with that, and I just wanted to make something really fun and goofy. So that was my whole thing with that.
What was it like working with kids? And some pretty young.
Yeah, they were awesome. Lucas and Morgan and Rory and Tygan, so some of them, Lucas was from the Town Hall Theater here, and then my girlfriend did like dance classes at Salisbury Community School around here, and so she knew Vicky, who was an activities coordinator there, and she set up these auditions, and I just basically walked in and was like, hey, I'm a college student, you guys want to be in a movie? And they were like, yeah! So I just auditioned like 10 kids there, and picked the ones who were good fits for the roles, and cast some of my friends in the college that I thought looked sort of like them. And yeah, I mean, the whole idea was just to like try to get into like kid fantasy world. And I was at the dining hall one day and I was like, man, like wouldn't it be amazing to have magical lice that guided you as an oracle? And so I kind of just like created this movie around it and didn't really overthink anything. So yeah.
You also had another film play here as part of the White River Independent Filmmaking Emerging Filmmakers called Pop Star. I don't think, that was today, it was shown today. Did you come to that?
It was at 8 in the morning. I didn't know about it until this morning when Victoria, who acted in it, told me about it. I was like, oh my god, I'm so sad I missed it. But
tell us about that film.
Yeah, so I think during the pandemic I got completely sucked into TikTok, and I think TikTok's main selling point is that it kind of convinces anyone that fame is right around the corner at all times, and it's like playing the lottery every time you submit a TikTok. So I was like, oh man, I want to be an international superstar so badly. And I became this like incel in my room, like just brainstorming these TikToks that when I look back on now, after like being social again after the pandemic, are just so horrific. And so I was like, oh, like what would it be if I made this, story where this like comical version of myself. And also like had been dealing with like a lot of like gender dysphoria over the last year, and so wanted to like tell this really queer story about like an aspiring TikTok sensation that from the outside it was just so clear nothing was going to happen. And so basically I had my friend act as this like cross fantasy person where he would fantasize about these amazing musical sequences and then ultimately was a complete loser when the fantasy sequences were off. So you can check it out on my website. It's willhoppin.com.
And what do you have coming up next? Are you going to bring us a feature film to take a look at?
I'm
just
trying
asking.
to. So actually this last week, and the reason why I missed the opening night celebration, I was so sad about that, is because I was working on this feature called Painted Ladies about an aspiring makeup artist who has to do mortuary cosmetology work to get to the point she wants to in her career. And so I raised a bunch of money for it. I flew people out all over the country to come to Middlebury to shoot in some facilities here because I wanted to take place in Vermont. And it was just, again, a disaster. The whole shoot coordination was impossible. I just get these like fantastical ideas when I'm alone in my room, similar to when I was trying to be a TikTok star. And
So you spent no money on a producer?
no, I didn't. Didn't have a producer. I didn't even have an AD. And I had like, anyways, I was like trying to do everything. And so we barely eked out a film this past week. I'm trying to make a feature film next summer, but I learned a lot of lessons from this last week. I think this film's gonna probably come out in October or something. Worked at NBC over the summer doing some production and cloud architecture stuff, and decided that indie filmmaking is much more my style. So,
Okay.
thanks for asking.
Well, sure. Who has questions? Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, Joan, go ahead.
I'm really curious about the auditions that you had for the kids who were involved, and how did you decide what type of character, I mean, not really characters, but people you wanted? And was it based on the interviews and wanting to show certain segments? Because it was really nice diversity, but also they fit together really well.
Yeah, well, we worked really, really, really hard on getting a diverse cast, which is not always easy in the state of Vermont. We had, I think, 6 or 7 kids of color. We had 4 or 5 kids, and then a couple of Asian, Indian. Anyway, we worked really hard to try to get those people. And Don, who was our new American kid, came to us within the last. Very at the last moment, thank God. He was incredible. But what the auditions were with me and the 2 directors and our choreographer. And it was very hard on Zoom. Zoom sucks. I'm sorry, it just does. But we had the kids do like I think a 2-minute monologue, and then we did improv stuff with them. The actors just said gave them game stuff to do, sort of fun game stuff to do, and just trying to see how they took direction and how creative they were. And we knew that we wanted different shapes, different sizes, different colors, different ages. So actually, Heidi's daughter, Avery, got cast. She was 13 at the time.
The grades and the
The
glasses.
pigtails?
Yeah, the pigtails,
Yes.
little Avery.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it was 13 up to 19, and everything in between. And so, I don't know, maybe 70 or so people auditioned across the state for it, and then we cast 15.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Who else? Yes.
I'm a Vermont parent on the team who could have sung every one of those songs. I'm just so grateful for what you did.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, you can go online and stream it if you ever want to show it to your kid. I don't know how old he is, but to share it and talk about it.
Where is it located online?
You can just go www.listenupvt.org, but you can talk to me afterwards, I can tell you, but
They are 18.
they are 18.
And I'm just thinking what you've done as a gift. I also do want to ask about distribution outside of the state. Sorry, about distribution outside of the state. Because Vermonters, of course, should take this in. But it has a universality to it. So
Yeah.
I was curious about that too.
Well, this is the conversation that happens, I think, at every film screening, because people see these films and they're like, they're amazing, or I'm really moved by it, and where's it going to go, and what's distribution? Distribution is really tough. It's gotten harder and harder. As I said, it's going to be on Vermont PBS in a week, and then it'll be on all of their platforms for 3 months. so anybody can go and watch it. You know, it's, yes, of course, should be seen in other places. And I think one of the things I would like to do is start reaching out to other educational institutions and communities in New Hampshire, for instance, and around New England to try to get the film shown.
I do think that it makes sense to tour New England where the sort of parochial distinctions between one state and another are blurred. New Hampshire, Maine.
Yeah.
Where I don't think someone would hold it against you because it was Vermont teens doing this. In
Yeah.
fact, they should come away thinking, why didn't we do this?
Right.
Why don't we take one more question? You had your hand up before?
I did.
Go for it.
My question is threefold. I was thinking about the script writing you mentioned, the music writing, and then I thought about those talents that the students had. So I wondered who was involved in what. How did that come about? Did you do the script writing and the music writing, and the students had input into the tablets?
Right. So as I said, we first of all, we just spent time with kids and gathered hundreds and hundreds of hours worth of conversation with kids, and then we listened to it, and from that we started to think, these are the themes, these are the things that are coming up again and again from kids across Vermont. We want these incorporated in the script. So then myself and Gary Miller were the two script supervisors who then brought on another 16 kids, a lot of them from the Young Writers Project in Vermont, to work with us once a month on starting to write the script. And we would do an outline, and then we would meet with them, and they'd give feedback, and they'd write scenes, and so on and so forth. Then COVID happened. We had to move that writing onto line. We started to continue to do it on Zoom. So there was that process. Then when we got into the rehearsals, the script took a whole nother review with what Heidi was saying, this kind of work with the actors, where they would go through the script and they'd say, for instance, the whole Listen Up song, for Youth of Color, that whole section in the play, that was totally different going into rehearsals. Those 4 actors were cast in those roles. They liked the scene, but they didn't feel it was really their stories. So all that was written by those actors during rehearsal. And frankly, the song that was in place was also replaced by a song that they wrote during rehearsal with our music director, who was from New York City, and she was incredible because she rewrote that song, which is very powerful. So there was constant revisions of the script over and over and over again, and even some of the songs. The songs came to the rehearsal process fairly rough. We had, our supervisor put them into a score. The band was rehearsing separately, and then the band came to rehearsals, and then started to rehearse with the actors. It was all massive. Every time I watch this film, I'm sure every filmmaker does this, I just like the amount of work and intensity just is like, it's like post-traumatic stress. I mean, and this was all during COVID. I mean, it was just, we met, Heidi was in on those, for the 6 months before we toured this. Every month, we'd have to have a conversation with somebody from the Vermont Department of Health about every single step, every single thing. At one point, they were telling us we were going to have to do the show with masks on and 6 feet apart. I was like, oh my God. So anyway, anything else on the process there?
The only thing I would say is that a couple of the days when the students were there kind of figuring out what this whole thing was about, they spent the day reviewing these 800 archives, and they really started reading. I mean, there was a lot of tears. My daughter would say that was one of the most impactful days, was just reading about teens in Vermont and what they're going through and what they're dealing with, and the honor that it was to then tell their stories. But to speak specifically to the tablets, those were those 4 actors' stories. So you see throughout the film that they hold up the blue folders, and those are other teens in Vermont's words. But that specific scene, the tablets were to show that it was those 4 students' stories.
Yeah, so there were essentially the actual documentary words from interviews that we did with kids 2 years beforehand. Some of that was in the play, and those were read when they picked up the file in the center. And then there were their own words, and then there was the script. So it's really a style of theater. It's called documentary theater, and I'm not the first person who's done that, but it's very powerful because you incorporate actual words from the people
Yeah.
that said it.
It translates well into film too. It breaks down barriers. Things are not so schematic that you think that's the play, or though I can see
Yeah.
that wasn't the play. The documentary style becomes almost documentary as a movie. It's a drama, it's a musical, but it's very well defined. I can see the crossover quite easily.
Yep.
Why don't we say thanks, please, to Bess O'Brien,
Heidi Power.
and Will Hoppin, the very first person to wear socks for a Q&A. Let me just tell you what's going on. We'll be back here at 4 o'clock with a film called Hit the Road. This is a young filmmaker, an Iranian filmmaker, I believe his last name is Panahi, Jafar Panahi. His father is also a famous filmmaker, and he's behind bars in Iran. But this film, I think the son has gotten out, and he's showing this film around. It is an Iranian, it's a road movie, a family road movie, and the family is very funny and very quirky. So we're going to show that film, Hit the Road, right here. And upstairs, we're going to show a release by Sony Pictures that came out last year called Jockey, with Clifton Collins, who is a jockey in the lead role in this film. And it is a story of Clifton aging and being replaced in prominence by a young jockey. It's quite good. So that'll be upstairs in our small theater here, about 40 seats. And at Town Hall Theater at 4, we'll have Karen Allen in her new film called A Stage of Twilight. The director, Sarah T. Schwab, is here. And following the film, Sarah and Karen will be on stage with Jay Craven, and for what will be, I think, a very good Q&A. The film is brand new. It just came out. I think we're the 4th festival or 5th festival to get it, and we're very appreciative about that. Our closing ceremonies are tonight at 6:30. We'll present our V-Teddy Awards. They're a blast. As many of you have come before know that. And then at 7:30, roughly, we will start our closing night film, The Real Charlie Chaplin. And for those of you who know even a modicum about Chaplin's life, he was a complicated figure, sort of a magnetic figure who drew both good and bad to him. And this film, by 2 British filmmakers who won't be here, goes deeply into Chaplin's life. Jay Craven does know, and has known for years, I think, members of the Chaplin family. He'll do some comments before we start the film, and when it's over, we will say goodbye and invite you to come back next year. So anyway, thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you later.